I'm Hanson Hossein. Welcome to Four Peaks. We connect with thought leaders and our audience participants as we explore innovation, entrepreneurship, entertainment, and community within our region. Together, we'll ask how these four peaks are changing the Pacific Northwest right now and what's next. Today at Canlis Glass Studio, how is Seattle nice impacting our region's success or failure? I've invited two local influencers to help me discuss the implications of what some say is an overly polite approach to business and relationships. How does this region compete on an increasingly challenging global stage? Adam Brotman is Senior Vice President of Digital Ventures at Starbucks. He's a native Seattleite who was bred for business. His uncle founded Costco. Adam started his first company when he was 26. He says Seattle Nice brings a sense of humanity to the Pacific Northwest. But it also means you either know people or you don't. Leigh Canlis is president of Canlis Glass, featuring the works of her husband, JP. They were crowned Golden Couple of 2006 by Seattle Magazine, even as they helped make this city the glass capital of the world. Leigh runs the business and is an active philanthropist. She says Seattle is wonderfully opened, but also isn't as nice as it likes to think it is. Leigh, Adam, welcome. So Knut Berger, in his book Putatopolis, actually says that this whole notion of Seattle nice is actually a myth, and that we're actually quite passive-aggressive and we're adverse to conflict. And this may indeed affect the amount of venture capital here, maybe how Boeing 787 has had problems over the last few years. So I want to ask you firstly, how has Seattle nice affected your business?
I think it's probably twofold. I mean, I think there's a really positive side to it, and that is that when I was 23 years old and decided to venture out on my own and start Canlis Glass, nobody was there to say, you're crazy. You know, I mean, that's probably the passive side that was a good thing for me in business, allowing me to move forward in that direction. On the negative side, you know, there's always a question of, where do I stand in the art world? I'm not even sure. People don't bridge the conversation that we've gone up against the grain in what we're doing, and I wish there was more talk about that sort of thing.
Do you think that it actually has impeded the progress that you would have liked to have seen with the company and with the studio here in the Seattle area? Because you have global aspirations for Canlis Glass, correct?
Yeah, I don't think it has impeded it, only because I do business the way I choose to do business. I feel like I'm very straightforward and very honest, and so I don't act in that passive-aggressive nature that I feel like often happens in Seattle business culture.
Do you feel like it happens on a daily basis? Like, do you experience Seattle nice on a daily basis?
I think so.
Yeah. What would be a good example of what you would see this as?
Well, I think, you know, I do a lot of philanthropic efforts, and so when I sit on boards and do different things in that realm, there is a long history there, especially with institutions and whatnot. And so I always find myself being sort of the youngest person on these boards, oftentimes not as much anymore as 10 years ago, but asking the hard questions. Why are we doing it this way? Could we do it a different way? And people kind of look at you like, wow, well, that hasn't been brought up before. So yeah, on a daily basis, I think more questions need to be asked.
And this is very different from what you're used to. You haven't lived in Seattle all your life, so you're bringing a different culture here.
Yeah, I hope so.
But you're finding there's some resistance.
A little bit, you know, not as much. I also lived in Hawaii, and talk about that in itself is it's a different beast in passive-aggressive nature. So I feel like here people are more open to the conversation about where we're going in business and how to get there. In Hawaii, it's even more so the opposite direction of don't ask the question, and yeah.
Adam, you're a Seattle native. Generations of your family here in the Seattle area. In many ways, Seattle nice is actually, you embody Seattle nice. You've benefited from it. You bring it to everything you've done. How would you look at Seattle nice?
I don't know any different, to be honest. In fact, when you brought up the subject at an earlier conversation we had in preparation for tonight, I was thinking to myself, I don't know what they're talking about with Seattle nice. I mean, I guess, and then the more I started thinking about it, I realized, you know, in some ways, I probably am the typical Seattle nice. Probably why I don't realize it.
And so, what do you think? I mean, you've gone to places, you've done business. You were an entrepreneur. You started when you were 26 years old, which takes a certain amount of aggression and ambition. You've had to travel and do business in other places, such as New York and Los Angeles. How does your Seattle nice play in those cities?
I think that first of all, the first time I ever went to New York and I did business in New York, you know, I was about 27 years old, and I went into my first New York meeting and just was shocked at how blunt everybody was. And at first I took it personally, and then I realized they would be saying nice things blunt and critical things blunt as well.
And did you ever feel like you'd like to bring some of that back to Seattle, or has it changed you at all in how you do business?
Sometimes I like to let it rub off on me, but it doesn't last very long. Generally, most people that work with me, I think they would normally tell me, Adam, you need to be a little less nice.
Now you work at Starbucks, which is a global success. As a Seattle-based company, has it transported some of that Seattle nice to its locations around the world, or has it had to play hardball to be what it is out there?
I think by definition, Starbucks has brought Seattle nice to the entire world. I mean, the company, I'm going to sound like I'm saying like a tagline here, but the truth is we're all about a smiling face and a friendly place, and we're all about human connection, and the company was built on that.
Well, Leigh, this notion of passive aggressive, this idea that they'll smile at you and shake your hands, and then sort of things sort of fall by the wayside. What do you think about that? Have you seen that personally in business?
Yeah, I've seen that personally in business and also in some of my volunteer efforts and whatnot. But I do think that there is a little bit of a confusion around the topic, and to bring it back to what you just said, I feel like the struggle for me is that we can be honest and straightforward and to the point, but also be nice, that those two things don't have to be one or the other. So I think that there is definitely a way to get through this and bring the Starbucks customer service and still be nice, but be straightforward in your business dealings. So that's the way I choose to do it. I mean, I think customer service is very important, and being nice is certainly important.
And your business is the creation and sale of glass art.
Yes.
Does it matter where it is? Does it have to be in Seattle?
Seattle is a huge place for glass art, and a lot would argue that it is the largest place for glass art now in the world. So in terms of a cultural identity, some would say that this is the glass art capital in the world, and that is Seattle's cultural identity.
Adam, you come from a family of entrepreneurs and retailers, and I would think of all the histories I've read about all the famous families in this country, such as the Walton family, for example, that you would have been brought up in the school of hard knocks, that you got to go out there and be tough, and you got to make sure you get the cheapest possible price and sell it at the highest possible price and get your customers and whatever else. Is that the case?
Well, you don't have to be mean while you're doing that. In all seriousness, I think that, first of all, it's funny to say Seattle nice. I'm proud to be Seattle nice. I think that you can be really effective while being respectful and kind. Maybe you're not as effective at times, and you're not as quick to communicate what you need to say. But ultimately, you can still, drive a hard bargain and stay true to your values and be tough-minded and deliver it in a nice way.
You've been in negotiation, for example, in San Francisco and Silicon Valley, and a lot of people compare Seattle actually to Silicon Valley because they say, well, that's what Seattle kind of aspires to, but doesn't necessarily have either the ambition, the skills, or the money to do that. But you can go in there into a meeting, and when you had your previous company, and still bring that hard edge, but openness and transparency, perhaps, as some of that Seattle culture does play into some of those negotiations. Doesn't put you in a lesser position when it comes down to having that conversation?
I don't think so. I mean, you can be, like Leigh said, you can be transparent and honest, and I think people really appreciate that. And sometimes that's part of the being nice, because you're really not trying to, finagle your way into something. You're really just trying to be straightforward with somebody, and I think that's part of the culture here is being straightforward. Sometimes maybe you're not, so straightforward that you're overly blunt, but I don't think it puts you at a disadvantage in any way. I think it actually depends on how you use it. If you sort of understand who you are, you understand, like for me, I understand that this is just who I am, and so I'm not going to try and be somebody different. I'm going to try and be very straightforward and very honest, and sometimes that's going to come off as nice, and maybe sometimes I should be a little quicker to say no or quicker to tell somebody that I don't like their idea. But overall, I find it to be, for me, I've sort of harnessed the Seattle nice best I can to make it work for me.
Unlike Adam, you were not born in Seattle. You've lived around the world. You've come from the Midwest, which is actually a very nice place.
Very nice.
When you came to Seattle to do business, how much of a culture shock was there?
Well, I was young. I was straight out of college. I had lived in Paris, and so the difference, I had just come from basically living and working in Paris, and that was a big difference. But in Paris, I was sort of empowered to feel like I could do anything. Even in this huge city, I was put into an environment and business that was fantastic, and I was just on top of the world when I entered the Seattle scene at the ripe old age of 21 and started working for Chihuly. I think the Midwestern side of me it's funny that we're having this conversation because a lot of people always say, oh, the people in the Midwest are so nice. And it's true. That's the thing that I think people gravitate here. And maybe the word nice needs to be defined a little bit more, but in the Midwest, they're really friendly. And so that's something that
people
I always
here are
am.
not as
not
friendly?
as friendly. No,
What's the
they're
difference?
not. I don't know. I mean, I think it's cultural. I think it's community based. It's what's your rate, how you're raised, how your neighbors are, and I'm the first to actually bake brownies. Okay, maybe I bought the mix, but I'm still gonna bring you your brownies when you move into the neighborhood. Introduce myself.
That doesn't happen a lot.
In fact, I've had a couple people look at me like I was crazy. I had two heads, and are you gonna rob me? Why are you putting brownies on my door? They may have thrown them away. I don't even know, but I didn't talk to those neighbors again. But I think that's just part of who I am. If I can bring that to the table, that's important in business and in personal life.
And in fact, some people say that the corollary to Seattle nice is Seattle chill.
Right, I hear that.
You never experienced it?
Not so much, and part of people will argue it's because I have a last name Canlis, so there's a common ground to talk about, and
Canlis being a fairly recognized name because of the restaurant here in Seattle.
Yeah, but when I entered the scene, I didn't have that last name, and actually I didn't even understand what that last name meant, and I still did not feel that Seattle chill. I do hear it, though, quite often from friends and people that I meet within business and personal life who've just moved here, even from New York.
Adam, you have a fairly recognizable last name as well, given the success and achievements of your family. Since you've been here all your life, as your family has been, are you responsible for the Seattle chill?
Absolutely not.
Do you know what people say, especially
I hear
what
that
they're talking about?
I hear that too, and I guess my guess is that Seattle is, we were a town that was, built up by some really a small number of very influential families for years, and then kind of blossomed overnight. I don't know if it was in the 70s or the 80s, but we're sort of a late blooming area with probably an underdog complex as a result, and as a result also my guess is that there are, I'm very fortunate to have a family and friends and a network that's always been very supportive for me. In fact, I wouldn't be where I am at all without that network, and I know that. I don't, and people come to me and say all the time, how can I break in and how can I get to know more people? And I'll just start introducing them to people. I hear that a lot. I don't experience it, but I know it happens.
And you're trying to be the antidote to it as well by helping people break through that.
That's the Seattle nice.
That's good. That's the Seattle nice part.
That's right.
Nice.
That's the Midwest nice too. I do that too.
Okay.
Just innately.
Well, we're going to go to our audience to hear from them on this topic. Who we got there? I'd like to introduce Craig Baker, who is with one of the founders of Four Peaks, who is handling the questions from the audience tonight.
Great, Hanson. We have a couple of comments during this segment. First, Robin wanted to talk about how Seattle Nice has influenced her business.
Well, first off, thank you for the subject because it's something that's very dear to my heart right now. I'm in the restaurant industry, but I'm also a creative spirit, and I fell in love with this industry because it's about giving and sharing. And I think at the heart of it, it is about the hospitality and being nice. And I give and give and give, and it makes me happy. And it's this balance between being generous, and then when have we given so much that we ourselves have been taxed? And something you mentioned, Adam, about learning to say no is something I'm trying to work on right now. But how do I say no without feeling guilty? And feeling like I've become a bad person because now I've turned my back on my community. And at what point, if I give all my time away, am I able to pay my bills? And I think in the art world, it's a real balance. You can be a starving artist and your fame doesn't come till after you've passed, or if you actually make it as an artist, and Chihuly's a great example. People say, oh, he doesn't even touch his work anymore. They see it as a cop-out. So where's the balance of succeeding, being able to really, be creative, give, and connect with our community, feel we have value in ourselves, and not feel like we're turning our back on our community and being a bit of, a capitalist, if
And
you will.
Robin, how about this lack of straightforwardness that you've experienced in the restaurant business, the Seattle Nice? How has that actually affected your business?
Well, we have our Yelpers that have taken that straightforwardness to maybe, a little self-entitlement.
So a certain aggressiveness or passive aggressiveness in the reviews that you received online.
Why don't you complain when you're sitting at the table? Exactly. That's where we can make a difference. In your bedroom. Thank you.
Well, you know what? And that's an interesting comment, because increasingly we can actually hide a little bit behind some of the technology in terms of how we interact. We won't call somebody directly. We'll send them an email, or we'll just use social media to make the comments. In fact, Adam, Starbucks is, you call Starbucks stores the third place, right? This is the place where people gather, where community is built. You were directly involved in creating the Starbucks Digital Network, which is actually meant to bring content to actually feed that community within a store. But it is relying on technology to a certain extent, so you're actually encouraging people to look at their tablets or their phones and their computers in the store, which actually does shut them off a little bit. What's your thoughts on how technology feeds some of that passive aggressiveness, or that inability to connect directly to people?
Well, you see it, I remember when blogs first came out, and it was like you could predict the first comment was always going to be really negative, and the second comment was going to be negative, and then pretty soon people would come in, and you get this you get more of a balanced dialogue. So it showed me that a lot of people that had negative things to say were quick to say them when they weren't, in front of your face, or they didn't know you. So I do think that technology allows people to sort of hide behind it with when they don't have something nice to say, but ultimately, I think technology ultimately balances that out. And I think in our stores, for example, at Starbucks, we realize that we have to strike a balance as well. We have some people want to socialize physically, some people want to do it digitally, and we have to just recognize that there's a balance that's going to always be there. We're not going to go backwards and suddenly stop socializing or commenting or using technology to say nice things or not so nice things. So I think the key is to try and encourage people to, come out. So when somebody says something negative on a Yelp comment, I hope that the restaurateur says, please come back and come here and let's talk about this. So I think there's ways to, you don't just shout back through technology. You sort of invite people to meet face to face.
Great. Well, thank you. You know what, we're going to take a break right now, and when we return, how is Seattle Nice detrimental to innovation? The digital revolution has turned communications upside down. It poses challenges and opportunities to professionals seeking to influence and persuade. These are our students in the Master of Communication and Digital Media program. Innovators who think entrepreneurially about how to engage communities through storytelling. As creative leaders, together we're charting the future of communication. Want to join us? Find out more at mcdm.uw.edu. Welcome back. We're talking about Seattle Nice and its impact on the region, and what can be done about it, and what a cost it has had for business and for relationships in this area. Well, let's go to our audience participants to hear more about how Seattle Nice might be playing in the region.
As a fellow host, along with Hanson and television personality, you're being far too nice tonight. You need to start. How about some hardball?
Come on, let us have it, Brad.
No, I'm just saying. Actually, working in this town and working across the country, primarily in business news and most recently with CNBC, I do see a difference. And I see a difference the way the media has sort of addressed business. And I think that's been touched on a little bit. In New York, it is. It is to the wall. It is the gloves are off. And I even see it in business news coverage, because there's this mentality that East Coast companies can handle that grind. Mm-hmm. And on the West Coast, I find that we would be guilty of it, that there's a little bit more softball questions thrown. Not as almost this mentality that they're not really up for it, they can't handle it. I don't know how that translates into how well business does or does not, but there is clearly a divide in terms of, I think, the respect businesses on the East Coast get, because they're there to play hard every day. And on the West Coast, we're busy kayaking and being nice and getting out for a hike and things like that. And listen, as I call it, the Silicon Forest. Let's not forget, Nordstrom has been the gold standard for years in terms of being nice and being number one in customer satisfaction, has been what everybody tries to achieve. And they've been hugely successful. So in that sense, I think that's a huge plus. Going forward, though, in the difficult economic situation we've been over the last few years, where everyone's scrapping for every dollar, I think the Seattle business community does need to take a look at that, as was mentioned, to be nice, but how do we toughen up our image perhaps a little bit more so that we are listened to with perhaps a little bit more credibility? I would say that that's something we could work on.
New York is a tier 1 city, Los Angeles is a tier 1 city. Seattle, despite having Amazon and Starbucks, is still kind of seen as a tier 2 city. Is that okay based on what we've just heard? I mean, do we need to step it up to sort of get to that New York level?
Well, it's going to be hard to compete with New York head-to-head as Seattle. I mean, they have a head start on us. But I'd say that we're holding our own. We're doing pretty good. And if you look at some of the best and biggest companies that have come out in the last 20 years, I think Seattle can hold its head up high against New York or anybody.
Can we continue to be critical about ourselves? If we can criticize ourselves, if our art or the way we do business, do you think that will help us sort of not necessarily get to that New York level on a consistent basis, but get us closer?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I think it's vital to what you're doing, and I think that fear is often the thing that stops you from progressing in the right direction. And asking those hard questions and having those hard conversations, I wish that happened here more. I don't think they have to be mean conversations or necessarily even very difficult, but something that takes you a little bit out of your comfort zone. How do we position ourselves in whatever we're doing, whether it's philanthropy or our own business or conversation with a friend? How do you position yourself to ask those hard questions and then push forward through that fear and actually progress? I think that's what would really help Seattle move forward just a little bit more quickly.
Okay. Craig, you had another question.
And we have Raha.
Okay.
Hi. So my sister and I were owners of a business in a gentrifying area of Seattle in the Central District. And we were upon our first year of, running a successful business. We were getting ready. It was a restaurant. It was a community space. It hosted great musical events. Lots of all ages, activities were happening there. And upon literally, we were, open for 1 year, and we were toasting ourselves and saying yay, and we were approached by a very nice other, fellow woman of color in a police uniform, talking to us about, some of our neighbors. We were basically zoned, we were zoned for business. But we were right next to an area that was zoned residential. And so she came and said, some of our neighbors want to talk about some community issues, about whatever, about this, that. And we're like, great, because we're all about community and communication and openness and this and that. And we went ahead and participated in this kind of community meeting that happened. And the meeting basically consisted of us being attacked by these very highly organized neighbors that were, basically like accusing not me and my sister personally, but our business of, attracting negative things to their corner of the world or whatever. So anywho, and all I could think of during this meeting was, why didn't you just come up and tell me? Why, here we are thinking we're doing, it's kind of like what you said earlier, It's like you could have, none of the neighbors had ever come to the business. They never come and had a meal. They never come to an event. They never met us personally or knew anything about what we were about. And obviously our whole lives we've been, doing service-oriented jobs. We are very, pro-youth empowerment and women's empowerment. And all I could think was, this is just such a waste of time and resources and energy on your part to do this. And so anyway, it got me thinking, I'll try to wrap it up, even though, it was a very frustrating experience that lasted for months. We ended up being open another, for 4 years and, having a lot of success as a business. And also we're transitioning now into a better, more amazing space.
So there's that passive aggressiveness that we definitely see is a certain cost to doing business here in Seattle.
Exactly, but my question is, how does privilege play into this, into Seattle Nice? How does this idea, privilege play into it?
Well, that's an interesting question, this notion of privilege. In fact, this was accidental, but both of you, not necessarily, directly, but you're both self-made people, but your families have done very well historically. Have you managed to sort of skirt the serious impact of Seattle Nice given your place in society here? Adam, how about you?
I don't know if I've been able to skirt it. I know that my, I look at it as a double-edged sword. So for me, having a recognizable last name, I'm aware and I'm thankful and I'm humbled that I know that it's helped me. Ways that I don't even realize that it's helped me. At the same time, it fires me up because I want to prove to the world that I can do my own thing. And I think, I'll people that know me know I'll go to any length I can not to try and trade on my last name. It's for me, it goes both ways.
All right. You're a philanthropist. You understand the role of the Gates Foundation. You do it at a smaller level as well.
Absolutely.
I do feel a sense of community does feed your ability to be successful as a philanthropist here in this region.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's challenging too. I mean, I think there's a sense of, I would like to see more people that I know doing more in the philanthropic world. I'm always trying to encourage people when I mentor them to participate, to volunteer, how important that is to your life. And I don't think everybody here has that. I don't know if that's everywhere in the world, but I think it needs to be more widespread.
In a competitive environment here in the world, given the sense of globalism that we've got, can we afford community, at least in a business sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, I'm not exactly sure what you mean, can we afford community? But I don't think we can afford not to have a strong sense of community. I feel, and again, I don't know if this is just my family or the Northwest, but I was raised to always do the right thing and to give back and to realize that, the only reason that, the people that have things here that have them is because they had a support network and they were part of a society and a culture that had a sense of community and a sense of giving back. So I think I think you have to do it.
And I too think it's essential.
Okay. Craig, another question.
So I moved from Boston, and being on the East Coast, I spent a lot of time in New York, and my relocation agent warned me about the Seattle chill and passive aggressive, and I said, no way, it can't be that bad, and I've lived in New York and other parts of the world. But she was actually right. At first you meet people and they're very open to talk and very friendly, and I thought the customer service was quite acceptable. But then the follow-up, it's hard to get people to get that second meeting. You say, let's go out for a drink, let's meet, and at first I thought it was the east-west thing across the lakes, but now I just, personally, just a bit more aggressive. I just will really hound people and say, let's meet, let's go out, let's have a coffee, just keep at it. But at first I was thinking, is there something wrong with me? Maybe this is true, but it actually is true. Mm-hmm. You have to really be aware of it here and make extra effort.
So other than giving Peter social advice, how do we fix this? Does it need fixing?
What I find is a challenge is this is in my nature, as I mentioned, as a Midwesterner, to be open and kind and to actually follow through and invite you into my home for sit-down dinner. I love that. But as a mom now, that's my second big role in life, I find that I just don't have as much time. I don't have the time that I want to give to all the people that I meet. So I don't know how, like for me as an internal struggle, it's trying to find the time to make all of those follow-ups and to help the people and try to bring them into our community. I feel like because I am that type of person, I get called upon a lot. So because I am nice and I do invite people, then I get that a lot. I get a lot of people asking a lot of me. And that kind of goes back to what you had said about how do I stop giving so much of myself and reserve some for, yes, making money, two, for my family. That's been a struggle for me, saying no. So I feel like I have the opposite problem.
We have another comment.
I feel like I'm in group therapy. Hi, my name's Tim. I've lived in Seattle for 17 years. So, we've been talking about Seattle nice, like it's some kind of cultural dysfunction or some kind of personality flaw that we all have. And I'm just wondering if the question is, how do we address this? How do we fix this problem? If it's more in how we define it. And so let's look at how it manifests itself. RSVPing for a party and not showing up. Calling a community meeting and then showing up and getting completely blindsided. And so I would suggest that maybe it's in how we define it. So maybe it's not so much a personality issue or a cultural problem, it's a communications problem. And maybe the issue is that we are just bad communicators. And that's a much simpler problem to address, in my opinion. And because if it's like, all right, well, communication skills are a pretty straightforward thing to teach people. And maybe that's what we as a region, as a community, as a city need to learn is just how to communicate. If we disagree with somebody, how to communicate in the moment that you disagree with them. Or if you don't want to do something or something else, then how to communicate that directly. So I work in an organization where we actually hire people to come in and help us do this. And several years ago, we hired somebody to come in and help our staff be better direct communicators with each other, and it's actually helped us become a better, more functional business. And so maybe we need to scale that out, and maybe, you know, other organizations within Seattle, maybe we as a community maybe need to take a similar approach. So that would be my suggestion.
This communication solution.
I want to sign up. I swear, I think it's a very good comment you're making, because it took me a long time to learn how to say no, or even at least couch that I'm going to probably say no next time I talk to you, kind of, if I knew it up front. So you can see it's how I was raised, but it took me a while to realize that I could do that and it was okay, and people weren't going to be mad at me and not like me anymore, or that I wasn't being a jerk. So I do think there is a communication skill that can be learned here if you're from Seattle.
Does Starbucks actually do this on a regular basis, company-wide?
You mean train people how to communicate?
Well, just so you sort of understand that communication is key to this perception, and that you've got to sort of take it on head on.
Yeah, I mean, I think Starbucks has a good culture for being nice, but also, you know, getting things done. So I think that's just a testament to the fact that we've been successful, and there's been a lot of successful leaders that have trickled that down over the years. I think the point is a good one, that you're just not born with that skill. If you're born into Seattle nice, I think you have to learn it.
What about bringing back Miss Manners, etiquette classes?
Does Seattle actually need a mask?
Well,
under an etiquette
when we
class?
talk about RSVPs, I think so. I mean, I think there's nothing worse than either not RSVPing and showing up, or actually RSVPing and not showing up. I mean, to me, that's just crazy, but I'm a Midwest girl where things are cut and dry. You RSVP.
You want people to show up. People aren't showing up?
No, unfortunately, fortunately, we have more people show up than ever RSVP. So now I understand what your numbers mean and how to, when you're having an event, okay, actually twice the amount of people will actually show up. But to me, I think we do need a little etiquette class here.
All right. Going to go back to Craig.
Yeah, so this is I saw a big grid a while back, 2010. I think actually Hansen might have been the one that shared it on Facebook. But it basically maps out the entire United States and the world and shows the interconnectedness of all the cities. And then it colored the entire United States to show all the different grids of how connected they are. This region is called Pacifica, and it's basically the most condensed, smaller population of interconnected people that all know each other. So kind of like where I take that is the Seattle freeze, at least in my experience of jumping around from different niches and different industries in Seattle, it's all one big group of people that all know each other, that come to all the different types of events. Mm-hmm. And then they get this like buddy-buddy kind of like shoulder to shoulder, yeah, we're the people that come here all the time kind of mentality. And so even the conversation I've had with them is whenever you see a new person come in, like go and say hi to them, greet them. It's kind of behavioral change to kind of break that Seattle freeze down. And I've even had lots of people say that as well, that they feel that when they come here. And so I even see that as like a behavioral solution to the problem. But I know that Hansen's done a lot more into that region as well, of looking at those grids as well. So I'd love to hear the comments on that and what your thoughts are on that, if it's a behavioral thing, and what the difference between the nice culture or the Seattle freeze is. Because I see them as two separate things.
Well, Adam, if you think about this, even geographically, it seems that question refers almost to the isolation that we have here. If you compare it to, say, New York, which is that interconnectedness actually goes worldwide, while what we have here is almost physically forced into a corner. Mm-hmm. Yeah. How have you seen that in relation to some of the business that you've done, say, in New York or Los Angeles?
Well, I'm struck by how small of a town Seattle is, and I don't think it's always a good thing. I think that's a great point you're making. Growing up here at first, I just thought, everybody knows everybody, and then you grow up a little bit and you realize it is an amazingly small town, and so I can see how if you weren't from here, it would feel like there's just a group of people that know each other. Mm-hmm.
And indeed, that's one of the things that Four Peaks wants to address, is that we're trying to break down some of these silos by having people connect across these peaks of entrepreneurship, innovation, community entertainment. So back to the audience.
Right, so we have Roger here, who I think may have a solution for all of this. So Roger, you want to share?
I'm going to solve it right here, right now, and each one of us takes responsibility for our own Seattle Nice. And if each of us is candid, if each of us owns the RSVP issue, we can solve this. I think that we're looking for someone else to solve this for us. I mean, that's a Seattle Nice. I mean, it's a problem, but someone else needs to fix it. I think we can fix it. And if you take personal responsibility for your action, being candid, being polite, but being candid, being truthful, and being authentic. So we can solve this right now.
If you ask somebody who doesn't live in Seattle to explain their perception, it's a 20-year-old one. I think they'll probably mention Jimi Hendrix, Microsoft, grunge. What do you do about that when you're traveling out of Seattle? Because I imagine there's probably a pretty similar impression that you hear from people who don't really know our city.
Mm-hmm. Well, of course, there's a conversation always happening, usually during my travels, about glass art and the position that Seattle holds as the glass art sort of capital now, and how that's progressing and how that's moving forward. And glass art is a young thing as well. And the studio movement was just in the 60s. So, but there's so much more to Seattle. And you do hear, I think, globally about the restaurants here and what's happening here. It depends on who you're talking to.
People outside of Seattle are talking about those
I
things.
think I hear a lot about food, and I love that because I love food. And so I think I do hear a lot about people saying, oh, I'd love to travel to Seattle. I hear about all these great restaurants, and I hear better food than San Francisco and New York, and I like that.
Adam, how do you deal with perhaps Seattle's potential public relations issue?
I typically will brag about Seattle, and we have. I can't brag about our sports teams lately, but I can brag about we have an amazing culture. It is a very beautiful place to live, and then on top of that, we have these incredible iconic businesses that have been built out of the area, and arts and philanthropy, and if you were to go across the list, Seattle is, in my opinion, second to none. And I'm happy to tell anyone who I come across about it.
Well, that's an interesting point. Second to none, but yet in many ways Seattle still is a second-tier city. I was recently in Beijing, where you feel like that's the center of the universe. The energy, the money, the architecture, the airport. Our airport, we get secondary routes for the most part. We're not mentioned in the news every day on a national, certainly not on a global basis. How much should that bother us, that we are kind of hidden away?
I kind of like it. I mean, I'm an athlete. My whole life I've been an athlete. I'm a runner, and if I'm going to run a race, I kind of like being second for most of the race and then taking over at the last stretch. So for me, I think it's a fun position to be. I don't think you have that pressure sitting on you all the time that you have to be in first place, but it's right there, and you have to prove yourself, and I love that. And I think that that's actually what Seattle could do better, is taking that, okay, if we are second tier to whomever you're talking about, but how do we prove ourselves better?
I know you don't like being second.
No.
And you work for a company that's first in its industry.
Yes.
And so this second-tier status probably doesn't really affect where you are right now.
Well, I mean, I growing up here, again, I'm going to use a sports reference, but we had the Mariners and the Seahawks. They didn't do very well for a long time, and I remember, as a kid, you'd see any Seattle on TV, and it was at the time, it was so uncommon to see Seattle mentioned on any national news of any kind. I'd have a sense of pride. So for me, I think that we've grown up as a city, but I still think there's that feeling, which I'm proud of, that wait till you see what Seattle can deliver. That's just part of my attitude, and
That's interesting. Would that be kind of a new brand? Could that be Seattle's brand, that we're not what you think we are?
I think so, because I think it's there's a humility in it, but a swagger at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Swagger. That's interesting. So what kind of, would you like to see Seattle swagger a little more? You've talked about it.
I'd like to see it dance. I'd like to see it move.
If Seattle swagger and dance, what kind of dance would that be?
Oh, gosh. That's a great question. I mean, I think that...
it wouldn't be line dancing, would it?
Oh, no. Maybe a little hip-hop thrown in would be fun for me. I would like to see some progressive dance, modern dance, but, with an undercurrent of ballet.
What about you, Adam? Dance?
I know nothing about dancing.
How about an over-caffeinated, hyperactive...
Yeah, that's right.
All right. How about we go to our audience now?
So as I was growing up in elementary school in Whidbey Island, I thought this is the perfect place to live for an 8 and 9-year-old kid. And 10 years ago, I had a chance to leave Manhattan after 7 great years, but we were starting a family, and the opportunity came to come back to the Northwest and to Seattle, and I jumped at it, and it's been a great decision. We have such an awesome community, not just in the Seattle area, but where we live specifically. My kids go out to the park, there's park moms that watch them, and it's a great community to raise a family, and we should think about that as well.
Well, I have something to say about that.
You're a mom.
I'm a mom, and I'm a new mom. I mean, I've been a mom just for a year and a half, and I think that having lived in Hawaii for 4 years, and my husband's from Hawaii, that Seattle feels like it's not a community based around children. And so to me, that's been a little bit of a struggle. There seems to be a big separation for me about business and socialization, and also involving your children. And I wish it were a little bit more accepting and open to having your children at all of these events and being more about your children. I wish that were a little bit stronger.
Okay. Craig?
So as someone who's transplanted from the other side of the world, I'm not quite sure what you're worried about. You are very well known around the world, be it because of your legendary music scene, your beautiful scenery, the amazing iconic businesses you have produced. And so I wonder really, what is the problem as being seen as young, creative, successful, and nice?
I was wondering the same thing, to be honest with you. Hansen keeps saying that he goes to break by saying that, are we a second-class town? I'm like, heck no, we're not a second-class. What are you talking about? So I'm not being nice right now.
No, that's good. No, you're coming out and being very direct.
Earned.
And you're young, successful, and good-looking. I think is that what he said. So.
And I think I want to say really quickly that, I didn't want to be contradictory earlier. I think that you can be nice, and I feel that I am nice, but you can also not be passive. You can be authentic. And so I think we should be proud of being nice, but I think we need to be more authentic, more true, and I think nice can be redefined. Maybe we should redefine that word and be proud of it.
We heard from Brad Good, who said, he's been to New York and LA, and he's done some business reporting. He says, this is all great, but we've got to really step it up. And we've heard this also from venture capital people here, such as Andy Sack, that we have to play an A game, and we're not necessarily A game players here.
But I don't know how that can be said, because think of all the great companies that are coming out of Seattle. I mean, look at what, it used to be grunge, and now it might be defined by these iconic businesses that are here. And I think people are starting to take note. So instead of always hearing, oh, how do you live in Seattle? It's so gray, or you're so far away from everything. It's usually, wow, what major things are happening in that city? I like that response.
Yeah. Okay. Craig?
Well, my concern is I think a lot of people in Seattle feel like if they get successful, that people in Seattle give them a hard time. Like if you're Starbucks and you become the top, then you get, called out for saying, well, you're ruining community businesses. I mean, I think people feel guilty about being successful in Seattle, and that holds them back sometimes because they don't want to be the top guy, because we don't want to feel bad for being good at what we do. How do you deal with that as a big company?
Well, I think there's a responsibility that comes with being successful. I love working for Starbucks because the company has such a huge heart. It was basically founded on that notion of treat your employees well. In fact, we call our employees partners because we give them health care and stock benefits. And there's just, there's a responsibility to treat your employees right, treat your community right. And I think that with success comes responsibility, and if the company is built with a heart from the beginning, then the bigger you get, the more you can use that heart and use that scale for good.
All right, we'll be right back with some concluding thoughts. We're back talking about Seattle Nice, and let's go back to our audience about this.
Great. So I know we don't have much time left, but I think Shay has a really interesting comment that it'll be interesting to get the panel's reaction to.
Thanks, Craig. So we've talked about some great Northwest institutions today, but Amazon is the youngest company that we've talked about. What have we done in the last 15 years to put ourselves forward on a global scale? What should we be doing, and what can we do, nice or not, to get back to that level?
Well, it's an interesting question because actually we're approaching the 50th anniversary of the 1962 World's Fair, and that was defined by the space age. And even then, the organizers of that World's Fair were looking to sort of aspire to New York or Los Angeles levels and said we could be the next Paris, for example. As we look to the next 50, as we think about how do we define that age through the perspective of Seattle, how would you go about thinking that? Adam?
Well, I think that Seattle has, in the last 15 years, last 20 years, has produced a lot of, amazing rock bands and companies, and I don't see it slowing down myself. I don't really know how Seattle Nice, to be honest with you, I don't think it holds us back. I actually think that for us, Seattle Nice is part of what makes great for great customer service and integrity. And I don't personally, just being in the community, I think that we're just getting started. We're not slowing down at all.
So it defines us, and we should embrace it.
I think so.
All right, Leigh, your concluding thought.
I think that Seattle people in business and philanthropy and whatnot can learn to be more assertive and not think of it as being aggressive. And so to bring up the hard questions and to have conversations around them, not be scared of it, and hopefully see the progression from that, but still be kind and honest and authentic. And to me, those things do mean nice. So.
Okay, so if we are going to be looking at the next 50 years, and if we said that the space age was all about Seattle with aeronautics, and Boeing is not really here anymore, if you think about what is great about this area, what are some of those marquee things that you would like to use to define where we're headed, our future?
Well, in my world, it's glass art. I mean, it sounds, people here are so used to being surrounded by glass art. Whether you like it or not, it's part of your everyday life. Most likely it's in a hotel or a restaurant or somebody's home, and you get outside of that and you realize it's not really there in other cultures. And so I think, on down the road in 50 years, but in 200, 300 years, Seattle will be on the map for its movement of the studio glass movement and what happened here in the art world. And I'm sure you would ask anybody in their field, and obviously Starbucks and coffee, are you kidding? There's great strides there. But I think there are big places for us to go in the art world.
Adam, is coffee everlasting as our legacy?
I hope so. I think it's customer service and innovation. If you look at Amazon.com, Costco, Starbucks, Microsoft, I think innovation and customer service are two trademark aspects of Seattle, and I think it's reflective of the culture, and I think it's going to continue to produce great people and great businesses and great nonprofits and a great community. I think that the reputation of the Seattle area has blossomed so much in the last 20 years. If you were placing a bet on the next 20 years, I think everything that's made Seattle great in the last 20 years is just as strong and better, just with more incredible people and the influx of people from New York and San Francisco and Boston that might toughen us up a little bit, make us more assertive. That can only help.
So Seattle is a global asset, Leigh?
Yes, I mean, I think the case has been made. The customer service and everything, it's proven in itself. And we're talking about these companies between Amazon and Nordstrom and Starbucks and Costco and blah, blah. And cultural output, absolutely. I think we're on the map, in my opinion, for specifically for glass art.
All right, well, I think that's an optimistic, insightful, concluding remark. So thank you all for joining us here at Canlis Glass in Seattle. We invite you all to extend your reach next time for another episode of Four Peaks. I'm Hanson Hossein. Thanks for joining us.